reliance upon commodity oil prices, it's kind of glass half full question. That means one of our biggest opportunities is energy conservation and renewable energy sources. And I think more work, there's so many countries trying to do that. In Obama's State of the Union speech, he talked about having to invest in that, and they've got a whole lot more than we do to invest. But I think it's an area that we should be looking at, because my intuition is return for dollar invested, we could do at least as well, if not better, investing in conservation, because that's another way to help, or renewable energy, than spending hundreds of millions of dollars on further investment in traditional power. Now, you have to do both. You can't do either. But no, I think it's a huge opportunity. As I said, within the government, I think it's Petrojam or one of their entities that are actually coordinating. I've heard a presentation from them.
Yeah, just to finalize that, Barbados has done quite well with solar water heaters, for example. And it would be great to see Jamaica start to kick off in the region solar energy, electric, as well. And we have a lot of sun.
Absolutely.
So if you could do it, would help.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Bowen, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I am concerned about Jamaica debt ratio, 140% of GDP. And it is no secret that one of the problems, what led to that really, is that they have borrowed a lot of money from the private banks, basically, which you lead. And so they may have been scarce capital or limiting conditions for the private sector to access funds. Now that all of that has been renegotiated to some extent with the IMF bailout, how do you see the banks and basically your bank role in helping to make some more funds accessible to the private sector?
Sure. That's something I both could talk on for a long time and am questioned about by people in and out of the government all over about. I think that there's been huge success over the last year in stabilizing things, and which was the objective of the whole JDX, and which was a precondition to the IMF agreement. Both of those were not plans to get the economy growing, but just to settle it down. So to your point now is, how do we as a country, recognizing that the financial sector is an important part of that, make sure that that the economy starts growing? It very much. We've been pushing very hard to grow our non-government lending. And I remember when we were going through, leading up to the JDX, and again, because we're the largest holder of government debt, both through direct loans and securities and things like that. We tendered, and it's public information, just under $1 billion US into the Jamaican debt exchange. So that's a lot of money. We're very focused on growing our non-government loan portfolio for one good reason, is if we don't lend it to private sector, by default, it goes to the government because you sit your excess liquidity with the government, with Bank of Jamaica. So we're aggressively trying to do that. But it's something that all parties need to work together on. A few of the heads of the banks were with Minister Shaw and Governor of Bank of Jamaica yesterday afternoon, talking about, and it's the whole thing. We can all sit there and say, well, you're not bringing rates down fast enough, and well, you're still spending too much on the government and not doing this. All right, what do we all really need to do? And I think some of it is helping build confidence, because there are a lot of people who've had projects they've been holding on, not because of rate and borrowing, but because they're just not confident. They weren't confident halfway through 2010. that the next 12 to 18 months was going to justify investment in their business. There's much more confidence today. We have to find ways to identify those good projects. I mean, not every project risk makes sense for bank debt, but whatever the level of risk, if it isn't bank debt, look at the equity markets and find a way to make things happen. If we do believe, and this is our position, that our view that 2011 is going to be a year of improvement, it then is strategically a year for us to be slightly more open on the risk basis. You always want to kind of open up on the upturn of an economy, not on the downturn. We got to balance that off with the fact that there's still a lot of bad debt in the marketplace. I think the right ingredients are there. There's things the government can do. There's things the private sector, to be confident moving out, could do. There's things that we could do, and I know all the parties are working on it. I think we're now down to, and this is where I talk about disciplined execution, we now need to get beyond the theory and say, all right, where's the project? Let's find the project, let's sit down, let's find a way to make it work. All right, let's go on to the next project. And that's what we've been trying to do. I mean, my message is if there are good projects out there and people are having trouble finding financing for them, I mean, come out in and see us. All of my people have a mandate to, if there's a good project, you know, do what we can to find a way to make it work. Both because it suits our purpose, it is our main purpose for our business, and it suits the country. And that's what I mean by having to make the tough decisions and do the things that are necessary to move a country forward.
Sure. Wayne, first of me, commend you on your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I had the privilege last year. Pardon me? My name is Marlon Yard from the Barbados Stock Exchange. Last year I had the privilege of going to Halifax and actually seeing the first Scotiabank that was established. And I always, you know, look at the Canadian market, and in particular what was going on with the crisis over the last year and a half, 2 years. And it seemed like the Canadian banks seemed unscathed. You know, they were the strongest, and they resisted all the issues that other banks would have had. If you could, you know, put in 3 basic principles or 3 pillars, what would you say underpins and ensures that for example, your bank in particular, the one that you can speak of in particular, what are 3 main things that you say govern or guide the operations and the direction of the bank? Because it's something too I constantly deal with as head of an institution. You have your vision, your mission, your core values, and any day you need to have these guiding principles that keep things on track and make sure that when everything goes south, you're still at least on an even keel or heading up. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, the Canadian banking system and all of the Canadian banks. I mean, we have advertised it and marketed it a lot, but all the Canadian banks are recognized as amongst the top 10 or 20 strongest banks in the world in the midst of the crisis. I think it's a couple of things. First of all, I'll call it cultural, but just our approach. You know, when markets are booming and big US banks that maybe 10 years prior had made as much money than us, were making 3 or 4 times more money than us, it's easy for people to say, you're so conservative, you know, you're not prepared to do all these things, you know. Even down to, I've heard people say, I remember when I was in Trinidad in the 90s, being in meetings with finance people from Enron and saying, you know, I don't understand why you guys can't figure this out. You know, it's complicated, but we really do understand that this is a risk business. What makes or breaks it is the way you manage your risk. And the Canadian banks, and I believe Canadians by nature aren't quite as risk-taking as some other markets. I mean, I had, yeah, I mean, I had, when I was in Puerto Rico, was running that, because that's a U.S. banking market. We were regulated by the Fed. I mean, that's a very aggressive, and you try and take calculated risks, but as I said to the person from Enron, I said, even though I think I understand this deal and I think the risk makes sense, I was taught a long time ago by executives in Scotiabank that if you don't understand it completely, don't do it. Just because some PhD in math has designed something that can convince you that it's going to make you money doesn't mean that they really understand the risk, because it comes from going through decades of up and down that you understand that, hey, the assumptions can sometimes be wrong. So I think there's that. Strong regulation was another part of it, absolutely, because even if some of the banks we had decided to take on more risk, there were some pretty tight restrictions on us doing so. The reason we had no mortgage problem is because the Bank of Canada doesn't let banks take any more than 80% financing risk on mortgages, and if you do more than that, it's got to be insured by an independent insurance company. Americans at the time thought that was absolutely crazy. As a matter of fact, a lot of us in the banking system said, you're being too conservative, but it served us well. So strong regulation is there, and the regulators getting that balance of allowing innovation, allowing open markets, allowing all those things, but have to be that kind of wise balance to make sure that the right things are being done. And longevity. Again, when you've been up and down, through all of those cycles, when you've been around this long, I mean, this is not a short-term game, and it's one of the things that I think the U.S. Markets, and not just financial markets, were just executive compensation, and you may be aware in the U.S. market, it's become a real big thing, executive compensation, and the combination of short-term and long-term incentives. And since we're jointly listed on the Toronto and the New York Stock Exchange, I, like all my counterparts, executives in the global Scotiabank, had to sign off something saying if ever it's found out that our results for the area we were responsible were due to misrepresentation of the risks or things like that, they have the ability to claw back every bonus they've given us since that time. And that's something that public companies in North America are doing, and it's because the bonuses were so short-term driven. And it's why I get concerned in markets where when I see people so driven to be making more money than other people. I saw it in Puerto Rico when I was there. There were two banks that were trying to, I make more money than you, I make more money than you, and they started making wild amounts of money, $500 million each. And anyways, neither of them exist anymore. The FDIC had to intervene in both of them because of the risks that they were taking to achieve that. And I don't infer that that's happening here, but I think we need to, something even ourselves, we got to make sure that, we are today doing the right thing for the country and are not just doing, in the long run, yes, it's return on equity, but in the short run, you got to balance your priorities.
Well, it seems we are questions.